Doing justice to this topic in front of the audience, which is every individual is an authority in this particular domain, would be tough, but let me give two reasons why I believe that I'll be doing some amount of justice to the topic, which is can Japanese companies be number one in India, and more specifically in the consumer space. One is that I'm invested 15 to 16 years of my professional career leading a Japanese company, and when it comes to Panasonic, quick reflections on the top line, we would be roughly about 12,500 crores this year. We have 11 manufacturing facilities, several innovation centers, offshore development centers, GCCs, which are servicing our subsidiaries elsewhere also. And a very small comment which I heard in the previous session was that when will be the time when Japanese companies will start to export back to Japan from here. I'm extremely happy to share with you that we are not only exporting services back to Japan. It's been few years since we started to export rice cookers from our Chennai factory back to Japan, and that is the level of quality which production in India has already achieved. So one reason for me to be able to reflect something on this topic is this. And second is, like many of us would be sentimentally, emotionally be able to relate with what I'm going to share with you. When I started off my professional career, I've invested 9 years working for Korean companies, both LG and Samsung. Thankfully learned a lot from both of them on the other side, which was manufacturing, innovation and R&D. I worked for a Chinese company for 4 years before joining Panasonic for about 15 years now. And in the initial part of career, as it happens with many people, with what money you make at that particular point in time, with discounts being available for employees for their own brand, I ended up purchasing a Panasonic television, then working for a Korean company in 1995. So I have few slides to reflect upon, and to start with, I think this would be adequately already shared, but central to anything what happens, whether it is strategy or its execution, is people. And when it comes to India and Japan, there are many reasons for people to find similarities, and this logically creates better efficiencies cutting across various aspects. And these are some of the values which I believe we share in common: the family and the respect, the value systems. I have adequately traveled to Japan. I have adequately communicated with people coming in from Japan, and I understand that the value systems are very similar. The ceremonial rituals, the reason might be different for both of us, but are very similar. And then, the work ethics are very similar. The kind of commitment which professionals from both the countries reflect upon. Probably the work style might be different, but the work ethics, which essentially is about the passion and the commitment for work, we cuts across common, and cuisine is very specific, but there are some differences also. And if you look at language itself, I mean, it is predominantly Japanese as one single language in Japan, and we speak a lot of languages. That is our diversity. And age demographics, we all understand 65% of our population is below the age of 35, and that potentially is the biggest reason for us to look at complementing each other. And the concept of time, I believe, the biggest of the difference is that for us it is popular for not so good reasons, the Indian standard time, and we all understand that how Japanese are punctual and extremely disciplined when it comes to adhering to the timelines. And what it takes to be successful, coming in from Japan in India, there are many reasons. In the last slide of my presentation, I'll share my understandings of a three-pillared strategy which essentially works for Japanese companies or say any multinational company in the country. But I think it's very important in the first instance to enable people to people connect, and this should be done in a very structured manner. And in the first instance is to enable platforms which will enable engagement to happen, so that people understand each other in a better manner, because sometimes language can be a hindrance in enabling communication efficiencies. And as I mentioned, language. And I think when it comes to hierarchies, I personally believe that we should clearly segregate the hierarchy as we know, which is the structural hierarchy, and the communication hierarchy should be completely separated from the structural hierarchy. And the decision-making process, we quite often hear that we share our shoulders with expatriates coming in from Japan. If we try to understand that why that happens, and if you carefully look at many companies which are coming in from the West, let's say American company, you'll not find many Americans in India who are responsible for strategy or day-to-day operations or decision makings. But when you look at Southeast Asian companies operating into the country, not only Japanese but Koreans also, Taiwanese also, and Chinese companies also, you would notice many expatriates operating out of our country. So the fundamental reason, when I tried to understand why is that so, I believe goes back to several decades when the necessity of that time was to enable tech transfer for manufacturing to happen in this country. Expatriates started to come into our country to share those know-hows with people and train those people with the right skill sets. So I believe the necessity of the hour of the time is such that we need to decentralize the decision making and ensure that it is completely separated from the structural hierarchy which exists. And I'll move on a bit fast because I am a little short on time. There's a reasonable base when it comes to Japanese companies. The investment in last 22, 23 years is roughly about $40 billion, which has come in form of FDI cumulatively since 2000. And there are about 1,500 Japanese companies. I'm sure these data points would be shared adequately, operating through 5,000 establishments. So there are several divisional or companies operating out of a single company in India, and several industrial townships, which is actually enabling that confidence with the Japanese corporates to invest more and more in the country. And some of the marquee investments, we are extremely proud being a Japanese company, sharing our space with the stalwarts of Japan. And on the bottom left is the top sectors. Of course, automotive is big. Metals, many people would not assume, but is really big. And industrial equipment, the capital equipment space, we at Panasonic also have invested into the factory to do welding machines in the country. We do a lot of SMT machines which are helping electronic companies populate their PCB boards and those kind of products. And it's interesting to know that Japan has reflected a commitment to invest equivalent amount of what has happened in last 22 years in next 5 years. This clearly reflects the confidence of Japanese companies into India and its growth story. Now this is my second last slide, the question which came into us, that can Japanese companies be number one in the country? When it comes to Japan, if you ask a consumer what comes to their mind, I think the factors which are mentioned on the top, which is trust, safety, reliability, durability, craftsmanship, high quality, I think those are the things which naturally, logically, of the legacy which Japanese brands and their products have created over last many decades, I think those are the attributes which immediately come to people's mind. But times are consistently changing. As they say that change is the only constant, I believe that the rate of change itself is changing, specifically in the backdrop of digital convergence. And there I believe Japanese companies have to do a catch-up, both in the products and the processes which run our organization. And therefore, in line with the evolving customer preferences in India, and there are many, but I have highlighted 4 here. The first one is that something which is going to enable this whole growth is the increasing disposable income of Indian consumers. And the data points are already starting to emerge. If we compare Indian economy with the ones which have already moved from being emerging to developed, there is a threshold, and India is just about 2 to 3 years away from that threshold of per capita GDP or per capita income, where people start to invest more into products which are premium in nature. And second is the environmental consciousness. So people have started to prefer products which are more environment friendly. And I'll talk about this subject, which is one of the reasons that why Japanese companies will consistently do well in the country. And third is people want better quality, and people want comfortable and convenient life which is energy efficient and safe. And therefore digital convergence will play a major role here. And if you look at some of the Japanese companies, I have not mentioned names here, but you know that in the automotive space, in the apparel space, many Japanese companies are doing well in the country. This is my last slide, and I have just about 14 seconds left working for a Japanese company. I don't want to delay, but let me take about a minute to explain this. So, can Japanese companies be number one in India? Answer is of course yes. Times are changing, and there will be opportunities plenty across industry verticals and products in the country. But essentially, how can Japanese companies be leading in this particular environment? Three things play a major role, and this is my experience of last 15 years working with a Japanese company. The first is localization, and this essentially does not only mean that you should produce locally. I believe, taking an example of what has happened in the automotive space, now in electronics and other verticals, Japanese companies have to nudge the small and medium enterprises to come into the country and backward integrate and develop this whole ecosystem within the supply chain. And second is empowerment. I spoke about decentralization of decision making. I think empowerment in terms of transferring the authority. We have adequate innovation capabilities, R&D capabilities, engineering capabilities in the country. So how can we improve the skill set of the local people here and empower them with the decision making to drive and become part of the global innovation ecosystem of Japanese companies? And third is rich communication. I think this is most important. And I mean, many of my Japanese colleagues are here, and it's been many years upon several discussions, whenever the topic comes up that a Japanese colleague of mine tells me that I will consider, I understand it is a politer way of telling me that do not ever come back to me with that idea. So we need to enable right communication, rich communication, to ensure that we do not lose on the communication efficiency. So I think those are some of the reflections. Thank you very much, India Today, for the opportunity for me to reflect upon my thoughts here. All the best for the remaining sessions.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma, for setting a very optimistic tone and also with sharing several practical takeaways of how Japanese executives can work with Indians. Our next presentation is from Mr. Soumyadeep Ganguly, partner at McKinsey & Company, on the India opportunity for the Japanese brands and recipe for success. Welcome, Mr. Ganguly.
Perfect. No, thank you. First of all, thank you so much. It's very difficult to follow the suit after Manish. I've tried to do this a couple of times, but every time I've not been successful. But let me try my best, right? I think what I'm going to do over the course of next 9 minutes, kind of lay out India opportunity as we see, as not only from India, but as we interact with our colleagues outside India and so on and so forth, right? Second is what we do feel that a blue book or a recipe for success for the Japanese companies, and Manish, you have already touched some of the elements, but I will try to that. And then thirdly, probably Manish, which you have covered, why hence this is opportunity for India, but at the same time, this is the most opportune moment. I think if you look at India advantage, we kind of see there are 4 buckets where India advantage is and which is real. And the first element is market access, right? We all talk about GDP, we all talk about per capita income, but I would kind of point down to a number which is towards the later half of the first column, which is India is going to have 140 million households which income would be more than $10,000. That's one of the fastest, not only in terms of percentage, but in terms of actual numbers. Gives a real opportunity for market access. I think infrastructure, I'm sure all of you adequately know the infrastructure spending in terms of various schemes. What it is also there is, Manish, you mentioned, there is not only physical infrastructure, digital infrastructure where India is innovating. So physical highway and digital highway is coming together, and India is showing the way that we are innovating. And Manish, you mentioned catch up. I say this is an opportunity where we have shown to the world, especially to the Japanese, that we can innovate too, and this is an opportunity to collaborate. I think third is manufacturing advantage. Again, people keep asking me, I'm in the manufacturing sector for last 15 years. 20 years back, I started as an engineer in NTPC, that we always talked about manufacturing. We talked about talent. 25% of STEM graduate of the world in next 10 to 15 years are going to be from India. And that's a staggering number. That's a staggering number, and only country which is going to produce so many number of STEM graduates, and that's the opportunity where Japan and India can truly collaborate together. And lastly, of course, government enablement. I'm not going into the details, but the PLI schemes, not only the central but the state, healthy competition between the states to make it work shows this is a right situation where both the countries can really collaborate and take the advantage of. If I go to the next page again, just the details, I'm not going into the details, but look at the right-hand side. Third largest economy in the world, 1.5 trillion, and 140 million household who is going into the 10,000 per income is a staggering number again. Infrastructure, we have talked about $1.8 trillion by 2025, and that is reality. Some of this, the projects have started, projects are done, and so on and so forth. I think this is a very important, this is my best slide, right? As you see there, that 20% of India's share would be working population would be Indians, right? 25% of STEM graduates. When I was in a Japanese conference, some of the colleagues are here, I can see when we was giving those numbers, people were completely spellbound that this is an actual number which can work, right? And lastly, of course, the government enablement which is happening in terms of PLI, in terms of digital and physical infrastructure makes it absolutely right. I think the question I always stumble upon, or we stumble upon, is that means everything is fine and we just need to start tomorrow and it will be successful. We all know, as there are many success stories, there are many failure stories too, right? What I'll try to do over the course of next minute or so, what we feel 5 mantras which people should look at and Japanese organizations should look at to make India successful. One is make India for world. India for India to India for world, very, very important. This is just an example where people have started thinking India for world, started taking action, and the first movers are getting those advantages. So very important that at the beginning itself the strategy is not only India for India, but a blueprint for India for world. Second, maintain a long-term commitment to succeed in India. And again, that's what Japanese culture talks about, right? It is not about now, next 3 to 5 years, but what about next 10, 15, 20 years, where you really make India count as an advantage for the organizations, right? Third, look for correct local leadership with high independence. I think I'm not elaborating that point. Manish, you have given examples. Apple is the right example. They've actually struggled in the beginning. That what is the right leadership? There are people, but at the same time, you need to enable the India leadership with the right set of governance mechanism and so on and so forth. Fourth, look, we are a country of 1.4 billion people, so many states. There would be chaos, right? There would be chaos. It would be naive to say that there would be no chaos. So we have to, organizations are going there, they have to think about countermeasures, right? I know it's a very old example, but this is one of the perfect example. Even world was astonished when to see Hero Honda deal happened. They had a wonderful time, and they have a more wonderful, if I say, go to in a different path, and both the brands are equally established at this point. And that happened because they always, from the very beginning, thought that at some point of time, both the brands needs a separate establishment. So to keep that in mind. I think then lastly, focus on the fundamentals. Focus on the fundamentals, right? There would be certain elements which would be short-term, giving you the advantage to start, but focusing on the fundamentals is very, very important, and do it at the very beginning. Lastly, I will conclude saying what Manish's first slide was. Thank you for that slide, Manish. Is that if you look at those 4 or 5 factors, look at the opportunity and look at everything holistically, I think the exact equalities which we have are right at the point where the collaboration can happen. Where the differences we have, that can actually work for actually complementary skills. We have the younger population, the STEM graduates, and so on and so forth, which can absolutely come together. We have the digital infrastructure. We need the infrastructure of technology and so on and so forth in the machines, and then come together and talk to each other. We know how to deal with the chaos. Japanese companies bring in how to deal with the discipline. Both coming together can make really, really wonderful stuff. With all of this, we as a firm also firmly believe that this is the opportunity for us to take. And that's why we are really looking forward. And, an absolute pleasure to India Today for calling me as a representative of the firm to present here. I still have 3 minutes to go. So, I have also learned a little bit of a time discipline, I would say. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for calling me, and have a pleasure to talk.
So local leadership, long-term strategy, leveraging Indian talent. Thank you, Mr. Ganguly, for sharing your insights with us. Our third presentation is from a brand that has entered India fairly recently in the year 2012. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Rajesh Pandya, Managing Director of Japanese houseware and beauty care products manufacturer, Kai Group. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rajesh Pandya. I'm the Managing Director of Kai India. We are a manufacturer of nail clippers, razors, and knives. We have a beautiful plant in Nimrana, which is 100 kilometers away from Gurgaon. Thanks a lot for inviting me. I'm very much thankful to India Today for giving me this opportunity to speak. I've lived in Japan for the last 35 years, and now I am in India since 2016 as a Managing Director of Kai India. The interesting subject, I would be only speaking about Kai India, which is a FMCG product, a consumer product. Can Japan be number one in India? Yes, why not? You know, one thing which I have seen, which I would like to say here, that basically the battle for Japanese to foray in India is half won, because their characteristics, they are hardworking, sincere, honest, and industrious. So, our relations with Japan are very cordial. Just few years, last year we celebrated 70 years of our diplomatic relations between India and Japan. So, Japanese have already won the trust of Indians. What I'm going to speak about is have a localized approach Indian consumer needs. You know, we are very price sensitive, first of all. As I told you that I'm going to speak about my products, we are very greedy for value for the money, which is very obvious, and we consider our regional diversity is vast, as India is very big. So, to have a localized product and approach is the next slide which I am showing. That this is the nail clipper which we are producing 100% in India, in Nimrana. And they are purely 100% stainless steel. We have a nail green remover, which is very important because our food culture is to eat by hands. We have a nail tray, so the nail clippers won't fly here and there. Also, as I mentioned, it is 100% stainless steel. So, this is very important that what consumers are looking for, because whatever is selling in Japan is going to sell in India. It's a very wrong approach, because there are so many reasons where Japanese product may not sell the same way which we are trying to sell in India. Let customer try the product and feel the difference. This is very important, because when we say, "Pehle istemal karo aur fir vishwas karo." Consumer contact programs across the colleges we conducted, which we call hands-on experiments, shopping malls, residential societies, and corporate office. So let people use the product. this is from the consumer point of view. If Japan, if Kai India needs to be successful, and we are doing very well, because every year our sales is increasing by 30%. Also, we need to listen to the consumers. This is the advertisement which we gave in Times of India recently. And there was a voice from group of customers, that why are you writing cooking is fun? Please write cutting is fun. So, the most important thing is that we should have, in Japanese we say keicho. What is keicho? Keicho is to hear from the ears, hear from the eyes, and hear from the heart. That's the way it is believed in Japan, that when we are talking about consumer, like in English, in Japanese they say okyakusama kamisama desu. What is kamisama? Atithi devo bhava. That is the same thing, approach which we do have. So this is very, very interesting that when you hear to the people and you adopt their suggestions without having any ego. The interesting part is that normally Japanese companies, they do come here with trading intention. The things which are not selling somewhere, let's go and sell it in India, try it out. But our chairman, which is 115 years old of history with Kai, has a very clear idea in his mind that we don't want to be a trader, we want to be Vishwakarma. Make in India and vocal for local. Flexibility to adapt to regional customs and preferences. These are the most important things that when you are coming here, you create opportunity for Indians also and have the product which are the likings of India. Also, develop emotional connect with consumers. So this is also very important, that when you are doing certain CSR, like we have dealt with JICA, 50,000 nail clippers were given during the COVID time. Also, we have done, contributed to community food and health packages to needy people during COVID. Also, we are very proud to be an Indian, and therefore, this lion mark and made in India and be local and vocal, that's the most important thing which I would say is important from the customer's point of view, that how we would like to be successful in India. Of course, possibilities are endless. In Sanskrit they say karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Still, after living in Japan for 30 plus years, today our ambassador Suzuki, Mr. Suzuki, His Excellency Mr. Suzuki told that there are only 1,500 students in Japan from India. There are only 1,439 Japanese companies in India. In comparison to China, there are 14,000. So sometimes I become little sad and also angry that why there is a huge gap between India and China. Where are we wrong? We need to think. We need to think very seriously, because time is running out. India is flourishing right now. No doubt about it. This is the opportunity Japanese should take, grab it with both the hands. So there are certain issues with Japanese people and Japanese companies also. At the same time, we have also some issues. We need to address that and make sure that our relations with Japan and the number of companies we increase year by year in a drastic way. Thank you very much. Arigatou gozaimashita.